The United States' biggest public military initiative in the African continent, called AFRICOM, is changing its leadership. Currently, there's a transition period where the now notorious Michael Langley is passing the baton to a new general named Darvin Anderson. In this video, we're going to analyze this new general and see if he reveals any information about the way the United States plans to move forward within the continent of Africa. If you're curious to find out whether he is something different or more of the same from what we've seen of Langley, this is the video to watch. Thank you so much for joining me here on this channel. If you don't know me, my name is TJ. I'm Nigerian and British mixed. And on this channel, we talk about African geopolitics. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with General Michael Langley. He caused a massive stir and a PR nightmare earlier in the year when he talked about Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traoré. He put forward a highly controversial statement saying that Ibrahim Traoré was effectively using the gold of Burkina Faso in a more or less illicit way, bribing the elites of Burkina Faso in order to keep them at bay so that he could maintain power. He tried to walk these steps back in later interviews after a massive outcry from the African community and the Black diaspora community. There were protests in almost every continent around the world. It is my speculation that the United States could not have this continue, and they had to perform damage control on the perceived actions of the United States in the continent of Africa. So within a month or two of that statement, Donald Trump announced that he would be putting forward a new candidate for the leadership position of AFRICOM, essentially replacing Michael Langley with someone new. We're going to take a look at this article, 10 Things to Know About Trump's AFRICOM Chief, Darvin Anderson, to try and get some insights around who he is, what his positions are, and what his idea around his military involvement in the continent of Africa is. It is very important for us as Africans, as Black diaspora, to keep an eye on what the United States are doing in public, as well as trying to undercover what they do in secret. And this part here, the AFRICOM movement, is something that they try to do in public. It's almost like a public PR initiative, as well as an engagement initiative to try and win over the leaders of Africa. So this is Darvin Anderson, front and center on stage, ready to talk about what he's going to do as the new leader. The US Air Force General is the first airman to lead Africa Command. The US Senate unanimously approved President Donald Trump's nominee to lead US Africa Command before heading out for the summer, confirming Lieutenant General Darvin Anderson by voice vote on Thursday, the 31st of July. The position carries with it a promotion to 4-star general. Here are 10 things to know about the new head of AFRICOM. I'm not going to go over all the 10 things. I'm just going to pick out a few key points and we're going to talk about them. So born in 1970 and now in his mid-50s, Anderson is the first Air Force officer to lead AFRICOM in the command's 18-year history. Of the previous 6 commanders, 4 have hailed from the US Army and 2 from the Marines, including Anderson's immediate predecessor, General Michael Langley. This again represents a complete change, a washing clean of the slate, if you like, for the United States, which in my opinion further demonstrates the clean slate the United States are trying to put forward in the perception of the African people. So he's already taken part in numerous operations around the world, and some of them are in Africa. Here's a quick segment about that. This isn't his first position in Stuttgart. Stuttgart is the headquarters of AFRICOM. From June 2019 to July 2021, he led Special Operations Command SOC Africa under operational control of AFRICOM, also headquarters out of Kelly Barracks. That experience provides me with insight into the threats to our homeland, our interests and our forces, but also opportunities across the African continent to advance US interests. Now, let's double click on this for a second. Earlier this year, we saw Michael Langley start to say some troubling things, in my opinion, about Africa and its threats to the United States. In my opinion, they talk about threats to the United States in order to drum up fear and to create the justification for military actions on the continent. And notice here, he said, that experience provides me with insight into the threats to our homeland. So this is essentially carrying on this same trope. We've changed the leader, but the lies remain the same. Tell me exactly what are these direct threats that Africa poses to the homeland security of the United States citizen? Where is the advanced weaponry or nuclear weaponry that African countries have that could be a threat to the United States? If anything, it is Africa that needs to be worried about its threat to its people. It is Africa that has many United States military bases. It is Africa where all the surrounding seas are filled with United States military boats. I really don't think there's a single African president, group, or organization that is trying to figure out how to attack the United States. What the people of the African continent want is for the United States to stop meddling in our business. And they want the government to stop doing crooked and funny trade deals with our leadership. What they want is the CIA to not be involved in covert military operations and regime change operations, the likes of which have seen African presidents killed, whether it be Lumumba in Congo or whether it be Gaddafi in Libya. The other thing he said is opportunities across African continent to advance US interests. So again, this is what they always talk about, opportunities to advance US interests. US interests do not necessarily mean African interests. And Donald Trump has been very vocal about being US first. So anyone that is dealing with the United States needs to be very wary around the priorities of this. Are we truly getting win-win situations? Or is it one-sided deal, which unfortunately has been the historical pattern we've seen so far? As we move further down the article, we come to this segment, Somalia skeptic. Why is Somalia in this? Pressed by top armed services Democrat Jack Reed for his thoughts on continued US troop presence in Somalia, Anderson said the US had seen limited success in training their forces, calling the Somali Elite Special Operations Danab Brigade a capable counter-terrorism force. Right now, there is conflict happening in Somalia, and I don't know the extent to which the United States are there, but it's interesting that this is being brought up. And the fact that there's conflict there amidst him talking about trying to train Somali forces. This raises questions about the United States' influence in that region. You're training forces, you're saying it's not really a success, but they're capable. And then following that, we're seeing conflict. I don't know what the connection exactly could be, but I don't like the sound of it at all. With the Pentagon looking to deepen its partnership with Somaliland, he went to give proponents of independence some reason for optimism. I think it's in our interest to have some level of engagement in the region. Well, of course there is. There's vast mineral wealth in those regions. Anderson said, whether that's with the federal government or the member states, I think that is something I would have to assess if confirmed. Yes, there are Middle Eastern interests in that part of the world. There's mineral wealth. Everybody's trying to get a piece of Africa. And here we are immediately, the new leader of AFRICOM talking about getting involved in that area. Now, as we move on further down the article, I will just refer back to what I said earlier about Michael Langley and the Burkina Faso situation. Well, I'm sure everyone watching this video is aware that Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and now also Chad, have created the AES states. So Mali and Burkina Faso are extremely close right now. I'm sure everyone watching this channel will know that Niger and Burkina Faso are very close, both members of this AES state. And here we have, surprise, surprise, Anderson talking about this region. One of those partners is Niger, where the US was forced to vacate its airbase in Agadez last year after military push against President Mohamed Bazoum. What he's talking about is once the Niger coup happened and they took over from the corrupt ex-puppet president, the United States were told to leave. This is a concern for Africa Command, which again echoes what happened in Burkina Faso, which is ultimately what Michael Langley brought up that caused so much controversy in the first place. Anderson highlighted the challenge of making sustainable investments with African partners, given the volatility of the continent, hinting at relations between Washington and Niamey aren't as damaged as may appear publicly. Let me tell you, this volatility is just straight up a result of neocolonialism and actors like the United States meddling in the affairs of these regions. The terrorist groups that are currently terrorizing those areas, they are the second-hand result of United States meddling in Libya. Those that call themselves ISIS are an offshoot of the second-hand group created when they killed Saddam Hussein, the ISIS of the Middle East. That ideology and mentality has propagated in Africa. That is no coincidence. When the United States talk about terrorism, they are complicit in the birth of this wave of terrorism that we're seeing right now. I will say that the relationships we built in Niger with the military over several decades is still there. When the time is right, I believe there will be an opportunity. but that will have to be determined. Yeah, those guys in the AES, they don't want the United States there. They don't want France there. They're tired of it. They're sick of it. And I, for one, hope the rest of Africa follows. Now we go on to China, who have made amazing strides in and relationships in the continent of Africa. While protecting the US terrorist attacks remains AFRICOM's priority, Anderson said he sees a growing military threat from China. What military threat? They don't have any military bases apart from Djibouti, compared with America's 750 global military base. I'll tell you what they have. They have infrastructure projects in Africa. They have friendly relations in Africa. But of course, this is spun and you're seeing that propaganda coming out of the lips of Anderson immediately here. We are seeing them expand into more information operations on the continent, providing communist propaganda. He told the Senate, noting that China is carrying out more military to military engagements. What military? It's not China that has something called AFRICOM that is all over Africa. China doesn't have that. China provides infrastructure, it provides deals, it provides railroads, it provides airport. And the idea that China is like brainwashing communism into the continent of Africa is just absolute nonsense. China doesn't bring any ideologies of religion or politics when they come to do deals. They just come and do straight business. They don't add on all the stuff that America does. It's almost like America can't envisage another group coming into the continent of Africa and not doing exactly what it is they do. We are concerned that expanding Chinese security presence in Africa could restrict freedom of navigation and global commerce through strategic sea lines of communication, Anderson testified. Well, why don't America go and build some seaports in the continent of Africa? China controls all of the major deep seaports in Africa. That's because they built them. America didn't come and build anything in Africa. What they do is they come and they preach to us on how we should behave, and they don't bring any infrastructure. So as we move further down into the article, I thought there was something interesting here to note. Of course, he was nominated by Trump, so he's not going to say anything negative about Trump. But let's listen to this language that he uses when he's pressed around Donald Trump's aid cuts. Pressed by critics of Trump's cuts to foreign aid on whether China and Russia would fill the void left by America's soft power retreat across the continent, Anderson carefully avoided any direct criticism of the president. Two things to mention here. Of course, he's going to be on Trump's side. He's not going to criticize Donald Trump. Trump put him in that position. And secondly, see how they've said China and Russia will fill the void. What void? Yes, okay, I understand that there is some issues of aid that will no longer be coming to the continent of Africa. Ultimately, I think that's a good thing because Africa needs to stop having a begging bowl and needs to start producing itself and not relying on the charity of other countries. Now, that is not going to be easy to swallow because there's definitely going to be negative effects up to and including people dying and suffering because of that aid missing. But this should be a warning sign for Africa to pick itself up and do better, in my opinion. But the idea that there is some void that Russia and China are filling, he describes Africa as very much an economy force of theater. It's a strange way to put that phrasing, a force of theater. One where the US needs to maximize the limited resources we have. Here it is, an acknowledgement that the United States do not have the resources that they need, and they need the resources from the continent of Africa. Mentioning working with the State Department and non-governmental organizations. What they're saying, and that title of that section is called Soft Power Defender, is that they have to look at tactics to be friends with Africa in one way or another, whether it's by brute force, military operations, but this force of theater, basically, you're going to have to figure out how to negotiate with Africa at some point. As we move on, leveraging US business. Anderson joins the chorus of officials who have been highlighting the US military's role, buttressing Trump's commercial diplomacy on the continent. One of the greatest powers the United States brings is our economy, he told the Senate. Yes. What exactly has Trump done positively on the continent of Africa? Where is all of this business gain? If you've seen my recent video, you will have seen that how a brand new company has gone into the country of Congo and is extracting mineral wealth while the people of Congo is dying. Yet the United States President Donald Trump is declaring that he's solved the war while blood is being shed of Africans, declaring war, asking for a Nobel Peace Prize. What they've really done is just set up a new way to extract minerals with a company that is owned by Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. If you're interested in that video, it's the one where Donald Trump is holding the 2 machine guns on the thumbnail. He mentioned the Trump administration's $1.2 billion investment in the Pentagon's Office of Strategic Capital, as well as efforts to work with private firms seeking to invest in the continent. Yeah, he makes the deal with Congo and then he puts that company in there. It's supposed to be a minerals for security deal. Right now, there's no security. One of the things AFRICOM is positioned well to do is convene people to have these discussions, understanding that we provide the military aspect of it, but we can also provide a venue to bring folks together to look at the security implications of investments, he said. Are they trying to sell weapons to Africa? This is definitely something Trump has said before. He said it at the meeting where the 5 African presidents joined him a month and a half ago. They're looking to sell military weapons to Africa. That's what security deal means for them. One key area where Anderson made clear he thought the US was falling behind on the continent is the area of information warfare, where Chinese and Russia advance has only been exacerbated by dismantlement of Voice of America. I believe that Russians' influence and information operations were critical in turning populations against the French in Sahel. How about the fact that they have the CFA franc, neo-colonial practices, which after years and years of colonization does not allow the people to rise up and actually become wealthy, become self-actualized. Look at the results of what was there before by the French. It's disgusting. This is propaganda at its highest. People should be just as offended by that statement right there as they were with Langley when he talked about Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traoré. This is disgusting. I think it's very much not in our interest what the Russians are doing in the information domain. Asked if the US was losing the war of truth, he said it was a risk. The truth is incredibly powerful. We have that still. We are still a very credible and powerful source of information. They are so tone deaf and they're so out of touch. They do not even realize that in the same paragraph, he's lying and then telling us truth matters and the truth is on their side. He thinks we're dumb. We need to leverage that. I think we need to be more aggressive about it. He said, I wouldn't say we're necessarily losing, but if we do not engage, we risk losing it. You've already lost. It's so transparent that you guys lie, that you practice all kinds of covert operations, that you sow discourse in the continent of Africa, that you extract minerals without giving proper payment and parity back in return. Yes, our African leaders that are stupid enough to engage with you, it's also their fault. But there was no need for any propaganda. Simply looking at the outcomes that America has produced is what informs the people of what America is all about when it comes to the continent of Africa. I would love to know what you guys think about this new leader in the comments section. If you have any thoughts or anything I've missed, please let me know. But if you have nothing to say, would it be too much for me to ask you to write the words AFRICOM lies in the comments section? It just lets me know that you watched this video to the end, you like what I'm doing, and you want me to continue. Thank you so much for watching this video today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.